Hey, everybody. We got a special guest today. We're going to be talking to Derek from MythVision, the MythVision podcast. We're going to get into it. I'm Brentley, and this is the Punk Apostate. Let's go. What's up, Derek? How you doing, man?
What is up, man? I'm doing good.
Oh, yeah. No, I really appreciate you coming on. I saw you talking to Justin the other day from the Deconstruction Zone.
Yeah.
And yeah, you were kind of going over some of your story, and I didn't realize that we had such a similar kind of it's like deconverting and then going through addiction and all that type of stuff. And deconverting actually helps me get out of addiction. And it sounds like you had sort of a similar situation. Like
No doubt.
what was that all about? Like what was it like deconverting from there?
Oh, okay. So there's so many. This is the problem. Every question you're going to ask has its own book, right? Of material that can come from the noggin. And this is kind of how I'm answering your point. Like, why did we deconvert when we got clean this time versus 99% of people who found Jesus and got clean, right? Or they claim to get clean and then they reverse and go back, and sometimes they keep it, and I'm glad if that's what helped them. Good. For me, I don't know what kind of Christian you were, but I can tell you I was this very obsessed believing Christian who had this dogma and a real superstition in his noggin, completely trying to put myself into Jesus, and then kept relapsing in my life, kept struggling with addiction, trying to escape reality. And I think Christianity is another form of addiction, of escaping reality.
Right.
For me, maybe someone else has a different experience. Well, guess what? The world's a pretty subjective place. And for me, I think what happened was because I always had this deeply entrenched experience that I thought the truth was Christianity, and I had experiences in Christianity that were profound, that I had like drug addiction, where you get a profound experience and you keep coming back to it. I think what happened is I was dying from heroin addiction. I was injecting heroin, and then at this time, fentanyl was starting to hit the streets. So there were certain batches that would get me really, really high, and then some that I would just keep me from getting. I mean, I get high, but wasn't the same. And I was dying. And I think inside I was like, how come I can't control my behaviors? How come I can't just stop? I want to stop, but I can't.
Right.
And most viewers may, if they've never had addiction, they won't understand that you can't even control your own brain and what you do. Right. And that's a scary, scary place to be when you can't even know what you want. You can't do what you want. And I felt like I was in prison and destined to die. Like, I'm going to die. So I started going, why aren't my beliefs? Why is the God and this belief not doing it? And I was willing, through being humbled by the pain and suffering of withdrawal and addiction and the hell it caused my life, my family, financially. I had my kids almost being taken away. I mean, we're talking, I had 5-year probation because I did a larceny, almost grand larceny, to keep my addiction going. So legal problems. I'm a felon now. I can't get a good job. I have to go visit and piss in a cup for a probation officer that if I failed to piss this clean, then I would end up getting locked up for who knows how long. They'd probably throw me in there for a month or two in jail. And it's not fun. Fayetteville, North Carolina is not the kind of place you want to be. My wife kicked me out. I'm homeless. So I'm going couch to couch from addiction people's. I wasn't homeless like I lived outside. I couldn't live with my family because someone called DSS, DSHS, whatever, Departments of Social Services, because they said this guy's using heroin in his house with his family and kids. So they were going to take my kids, and my wife, being the good mom, loved the shit out of me, but could not tolerate it anymore and said, you're out. So my kids are going to be taken. My truck's about to be repossessed. I'm on probation. I know I'm going to fail a piss test. I'm a sack of skin and bones. I'm skinny. I'm miserable. I have no money. I'm stealing anything I can to try and pawn it to make an income for my addiction. Like, I'm at the bottom, dude. Wow. When you're at the bottom, you can go deeper or you can just finally go, I'm sick. And I did, dude, I didn't know how to go up. And I made this story up that the dope dealer was going to shoot my house up because I owed him. He fronted me $140 in dope.
Damn.
And made this up and really like manipulated my mom to try and get me another hit. And I acted like I owed him, but this isn't to get drugs. This was, I owed him for drugs, and he has my ID and he knows where I live and he's a gangster and all that kind of stuff. Making this up.
Right. Oh God.
Like,
wow.
I'm going as far as you can to get high. And I worked so hard to make that happen for 5 hours, crying intentionally, like, dude, just the worst. That I'm like, was this even worth it? All that I did just to not feel sick at this point.
Right.
My mom told me, I'll pay him back. Like, finally buckled, thought I was lying, which I was, but I was pushing it so far that she started to believe that it might be true. That's how many hours I spent into like making it real.
Wow.
That I ended up hearing her say that if I do this, you have to go to this person's house for recovery. And I was like,
okay,
no problem. I literally, for once, I just went, you're right. Here's the keys to my truck, which is going to get repossessed. Who knows when? And it did.
Oh, really?
And
Jeez.
I'm going to just surrender. But in my mind, I'm like, I'll come back. Don't worry. I got to get my mom off my back, my dad, my wife. Let me get back in the house. Let me get my car paid up. I'll come back to you, heroin. I'll come back to you, like, internally.
It's so weird how you have that internal conversation in your mind where it's like, no, it's like I'll stop for a bit, and then that, but it's always there. I can always go back, which is exactly the wrong thing to be saying to yourself in your head. But like,
I'm glad that I thought it though. Like, what I'm saying is sometimes you have to psych your brain out just to get there. Like, okay, it's there. I'll be able to come back to it. I've actually helped people get into rehab by saying this. Hey, dude, you think heroin's going to like not exist anymore after you end up going into rehab for 30 days? No, it's there. In fact, give recovery a chance, and then you can come back to it if you want to later. And they're like, oh, good point. And I'm almost encouraging them.
Right. But it softens the blow to your fear. Because a lot of like what I felt like was that you're terrified of living life without it. Like, that's one of the scary, like, you're just like, I can't function in life without this stuff. And so that, like, the way that you're saying it, it softens that blow. So they're like, oh, you're right. Okay, you're right. I guess I can go through, because I can always go back.
We live in the now. And this is something that, like, my philosophy started changing. My beliefs began to change and expand, which is, I think, where we're headed with this. But I wanted to paint the worst at the end of the road for me, what happened before the transition. Because I still believed in a God. I never was an atheist my entire life. I had doubts. I asked, show me signs, prove it. Because people around me were atheists at times, but I never was. I never came to this conclusion. And in fact, as I got clean, I wasn't an atheist. But my interpretation of God changed. So the more I learned, the more God got bigger, and that changed. And we'll get into that, I'm sure. But like, at the end of this road, what I needed was, heroin's going nowhere. I was so closely connected to it helping me feel better. I didn't know you could live life without it. I didn't know what that was. You get so lost in addiction, you don't know there's a normal world anymore. And I tell people, hey, listen, heroin's going nowhere. She'll be there when you get out. So if you change your mind then, because what happens is you start learning to live in the moment in recovery, and you realize that, like, hey, I don't need to be worried about yesterday or tomorrow. I just need to focus on right now and how I feel right now, make it through this moment. And it's moment by moment. They play around and they say the first 30 days are like 30 years.
Right.
It's so freaking hard.
Because like 5 minutes of that, the withdrawals is just, it feels like 10 years. Like, I don't know, just, it hurts so bad. Like, I don't know if people really realize how painful withdrawals from heroin and stuff. I myself, it was weird. I started on methadone for some reason. Like, I liked that better. And everybody around me was like, they were doing the other stuff. I was prescribed it at first. But of course, then all the doctors got shut. It was during that whole time that all the doctors, what I'm saying? And then,
they're changing the formula of pills. They're trying different things. I mean, I did methadone for a while, Suboxone, of course, Subutex as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
and then they were prescribing some people methadone as pain meds instead of trying to get them on opiates. They were like, let's just give them methadone to help them with this pain rather than giving them Percocet or Oxycontin or oxymorphone, Opanas. The list goes on and on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you're right. And they were, a lot of those doctors that got shut down were doing that. They were just throwing out, they seemed like at first they were just throwing out so much. In my mind, I guess at the time they were like, oh, you're supposed to be, they expect you to be selling it, honestly, is what it seemed like with these little doctors or whatever. But I didn't think about it that way. So I was just taking it all. So you just get so addicted And so then once they got shut down, I was like, shit, I'm on the street now, trying to get it. I ended up, being houseless as well, going through shelters, and, I was on the street for a little bit, but got into shelters pretty quick. It's almost too difficult to just figure out how to be outside like that is scary and really difficult. But
Exactly.
yeah, so that's crazy. Yeah. So, and I was the same way in the sense that I was a Christian while I was addicted to all this stuff. Right. But I wouldn't listen to the therapists and stuff because I'm like, yeah, I got it. No, you're good. I got it. I actually got Jesus is actually what I need. So I'm glad that you're concerned and everything, but I got it. Jesus is going to fix all of this. So, and most of the time what the people would say in my Christian recovery groups is you're just not relying on Jesus enough.
Exactly.
That's what you're trying to do this on your own. And you got to stop, just rely on Jesus. And I'm like, none of this means anything. None of this helps me in any kind of practical fucking way.
Exactly.
No, I can not try to get better. And and then I just go right back. It's
Jesus becomes a methadone. So when you stop doing methadone, you go to Jethadone. I'm just kidding. You're swapping things to fill your life, so that you're escaping reality in a different way that helps you cope with the trauma we had growing up. And you were going to get into this. I think it's worth nipping. My father was alcoholic. He was also not just an average dude. I mean, he was a Green Beret in the Special Forces, which made him already kind of narcissistic and extremely combative and militant. And he, he's my hero. He was invincible. When we went to school and my daddy can kick your daddy's ass, we believed that, but my daddy really killed people in combat kind of stuff. He was a real Leonidas of Sparta kind of figure in my house. And when he drank, dude, chaos. I'm talking guns get pulled, bullets going through roofs, through walls, guns pointed at foreheads, verbal abuse. Occasionally, rarely did he put his hands. He was pretty good about not getting physically violent with us or my mom. There have been a few moments where that happened, where he's in a blackout state, but it was more about the trauma of love that I needed. And I knew he loved me, but his actions and his words would make me question whether he loved me for real. So I think the message of Christ being taught in middle school, when I was at a private school, mom, tried her best to keep the family intact and to protect all of us, including my dad. When law would get called and show up at our house, she would protect him. And he would occasionally get so bad that eventually the military had to force him to go to rehab for alcoholism. And he did that several times. He'd relapse and go back on a binge. And we kids would go to mom's friends' houses to sleep just so that we could keep going to school and not ruin dad's career, and because he was the provider. And I'm giving you a long-winded kind of recap, so to speak, of my experience, but it was in 8th grade, 7th grade, maybe 6th. I can't remember, but I think one of those grades where the pastor in this private school, we had a little sermon get together. He said, "You ever told a lie?" I'm like, yeah, who hasn't? Well, if you lied about that lie. To lie, you have to lie about the lie to protect the lie. And he gives this rubber band analogy. I can't remember how it played out on the screen, but I'll never forget it. And he talked about these lies, they build up in this bank of sin that we've committed. It's, of course, we look back, we go, that's an imaginary, bank that we've invested sinfully into. But Jesus died. God the Father loved us so much that he sent his son. Now, I don't know how this made sense in our minds, because we're not thinking he killed his son. We're not thinking that way. We're thinking in the way of like, he came down and he had to do this. This is the only way he could forgive us of our sins. And he was so selfless that he did this. And Father God loves us unconditionally. So I went down and got saved, though I was probably already kind of Christian, but not like committed, because this Father would not let me down.
Right.
And so I always was trying to escape reality, I think, because I wanted to be loved and feeling warmth. And I talked to a brain scientist who wrote The Hidden Spring, Brian. I can't remember his last name. This guy's like upper echelon academic. I mean, this guy knows the brain, and I interviewed him on MythVision. He told me, he's like, the reason your choice of drug was opiates, and that was your main desire, the warmth and comfort that comes with it. Like the analogy I'd give is like God comes down from heaven with a warm blanket, wraps his arms around you and just says, I love you.
Right.
Like, that's how it feels, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, it really is. That's a great
really is. It's like the most unconditional warmth of love you experience. And he said that's because it taps into the brain and this and this and that and the brain. And he goes, you felt like you weren't loved. And it was giving you that love, just like Jesus gives you that love experience. And working through that, eventually I ended up escaping the addiction and finding out that I loved myself, that it was me I needed to love, not I hate this flesh and my filthy rags are like these rags of righteousness are nothing in the presence of God. I'm a filthy peasant who's lucky enough that he gives a shit about me down here. Like, no, I'm amazing. And I'm a great person. I'm not an evil, wicked, horrible person. I was sick. It wasn't because I was a sinner. There's a real medical condition I needed help with. And all of that started changing through the process of learning about my own self, addiction, science, and broadening my world outside of the New Testament and Christianity, studying myths that were beyond that, finding meaning in stories that I realized I found meaning in the New Testament. So like when I was listening to the story of Jesus, I found deep meaning with that. And I'm not going to take that away from anyone today. There's stories, there's depth, there's meaning. But then when I read Heracles or I studied some other story, and I was like, wow, Odysseus on his journey back from the war in Troy to get back to his loved ones. And he's on this journey and he can't quite get there. But when he does, he ends up fighting the bad guys who are trying to hurt his family and take away his throne. And like, I was crying. I experienced it. And I was like, yo, where does the real experience come from? The truth of it historically or the story? And man, my shit expanded, bro. And I started going way beyond the whole bubble I was once in.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah. See, and it's funny that you brought that up. Is like, I just learned about basically what you were talking about as far as like toxic shame is a big part of like addiction. They say it's like at the root of like pretty much all addictions is this like lack of love for yourself because your actual self is shameful. You feel ashamed of who you are and everything. So you're like hiding it. And, you're numbing out with drugs and stuff like that because of emotional dysregulation, can't handle emotion. Because a lot of times what ends up happening is like when in situations like that you were talking about where you're abused is, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be like physical abuse. But if they don't mirror that your like emotions are valid, then you start to think as a child or whatever that you're broken, right? Like you're like, well, because everybody feels emotions. They should say like what the reactions that you have to the emotions are what you need to pay attention to and be like, okay, don't hit the kid when you're angry or whatever, that's the bad part. But when you just say, oh no, just your emotions are bad, that like fucks up the mind. Like it just makes you feel like, oh, well then I'm just bad. I'm just broken. And I feel like that's used by religion a lot because that's, almost every parent like has a time when they're not mirroring their kids' emotions back to them. Go, oh, I see that you're feeling that way, and it's okay, but you got to make sure not to do whatever. Everybody's going to have a point in time when they're not doing that, and religion kind of swoops in there and can kind of like use that to make you feel even worse about to people that have like toxic shame, and then go get it cured right at church. And so it almost functions like you were saying, like an addiction, because they're making you feel bad, and then you're going to get it fixed, and so it brings your emotional state down and brings it back up. It's crazy.
It's interesting. Yeah, like is the experience we're already feeling, we're already going through enough, and then you start to create the habit of, here's the cure to that experience of trauma that we're already having deep down, of not feeling completely loved or not feeling complete in life, period, whatever it is. Because if you're doing uppers, I mean, you could do a mix of both. There's variations, of course, all sorts of stuff. Speed, they call what do they call that?
Speedballing.
I was going to say speedballing when you do uppers and downers, and dangerous, but
yeah,
your heart's beating while you're slowing down. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Your heart's like, I don't know which direction to go. What are we doing? And like, I'm just about to quit in a second here, because you're sending mixed messages.
It is, yeah. Like, there's each of these forms of ups or downs might actually reflect some of the traumas that we actually are trying to kind of fix. But yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. And Jesus, the churches growing up, it was demons, it was spirits, it was sinful nature. If it wasn't that, it was purely the Adamic nature, the flesh. So it just depend on the tradition that I was in that was trying to explain why I was behaving this way and could not. I mean, I didn't know how to get out of it. And once I did get out of it, what's wild is that it was what kept me out of it was discovering myself. So if you want to get philosophical, I don't like, meaning if there's anything beyond naturalism, that philosophy, it would be loving yourself and finding yourself, and whatever that means metaphysically. If you think there's something else going on, for me, I'm not so sure there is, and this is enough for me. But if there is, for me, the answer is not what I was picking up, the way I understood Christianity, the way I believed these texts, and the way that they seem to imply when you're reading them, what they're trying to suggest. So these are men at their time putting together their beliefs, their ideas in their own cultic settings. And I think it's important that we find that freedom that works for us, which is funny because when you go to 12-step groups, the first thing they say in AA or NA is, you must accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, right?
Yeah.
No, they say higher power.
Right.
So they're not even giving you Jesus per se. It's like they want the people who don't believe in Jesus to feel comfortable coming in because they know how they understood how religion was like, you put the name on it, man. Now we're already talking about Christianity. And many of these heathens, we'll call them, struggling addiction type people. I mean, this goes back to the history of when the start of AA started. Stop. Sorry, I got a dog underneath me. When AA started, Bill and Bob, which I read all this literature when I first got into this because I wanted to understand, like, how do I get out of this? And there's interesting testimonials where Eber Thatcher, I can't remember if I'm getting the name completely right, but he was one of the high school friends of Bill. Bill Wilson was the one who wrote the Alcoholics Anonymous book. And this guy was an alcoholic so bad that when Bill was struggling and wanted to jump out of his third, fourth story window and kill himself because he couldn't stop the habit, this was during the time they made it illegal to drink alcohol. So they had bathtub gin and other ways to get the alcohol to escape reality. He said to himself, if I ever became as bad as Ebby Thatcher, if I ever got as bad as him, I'll quit. Because that's how bad he was. Well, that dude got sober because he got his final strike in court. They just usually were thinking, we can't stop alcoholics. We don't know how to fix them. And they were going to lock him up, throw away the key. He was going to just stay permanently locked up because he didn't know how to stop the addiction. And these guys from an Oxford group, they had 6 steps before there was 12 steps. This is before Alcoholics Anonymous. They had 6 steps. They tried these 6 steps on him, and he found religion. He shows up at Bill's table. Bill's drunk, pushes the bottle across the table saying, hey, you want a drink? He goes, I'm good. I found religion. And then he thought this guy was just going to spew Christianity at him. Oh, well, Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior, you need to. And he didn't. He said, all he did was tell me I was lost in oblivion. These guys came into court. They told me if I try these 6 steps and just behaviors, like practicing these behaviors, that I would get sober. And it worked. And here I am now. And I'm telling you. And it gave Bill something that made him go, holy crap, maybe there's something to this. And he started to do that. And next thing you know, he realized when he talked to other alcoholics, it kept him sober. So he kept talking to other people who struggle, helped him not struggle. And there's some social aspect to that. Now they added in the higher power thing. And this is around the time Sigmund Freud and all sorts of these thinkers, these psychologists who are trying to understand God, and there's monomyth stuff, and Joseph Campbell and all sorts of cool stuff is coming on the scene of how they're trying to explain mythology, but how this equates to fixing people to get them cures for addiction. All of this stuff goes way back. And it's my opinion right now that some of these ideas in 12-step groups are behind in how they have to have these ideas of higher power, and rather realizing it's about socially connecting,
Right.
And not remaining isolated, because that's the key. It's not about, is there some invisible man in the sky that I must believe? There's something about staying socially non-isolated and connected to people who are going to help you to achieve that sobriety. And anyway, I'm rambling here. There's so much to talk about, bro.
No, you're good, because and that was I think the higher power thing. At first, when I was a Christian, I went through a lot of the programs, and like I was said at the time, I was not paying attention to what the therapists were saying, because I was like, I just need Jesus. But I will say the one thing that was really helpful about the 12-step programs was that time of just getting the floor, to just be able to say whatever's in your brain, just get it out there and to be as authentic. Because a lot of times you're, again, like with that toxic shame, you're like hiding who you are. Right. And so having a place where you get to be yourself and actually talk about what's actually bothering you in your head is really, really helpful, because it helps you get back to your authentic self, which, for a lot of people with complex PTSD and stuff, like they don't even know who the hell that is. They just know they're trying to get better, but they don't remember a time before the trauma, because it just sort of was always there. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that having the floor and talking to the community like that was one of the best aspects of it. I do think the higher power thing was kind of difficult. Like after I deconverted, I just made the community my higher power. I was just like, well, I believe community, right? Yeah.
No, this is a good point. I went to pick up my 5-year chip. I'm almost 10 years now. And when I went to pick up my 5-year chip, I had already left the idea of God, it seemed, around that time, 5-6 year chip. And I just showed up. This is the first time, I had not gone to a meeting all year. I just wanted to show thanks and gratitude for these rooms that I was sweating in my palms, miserable. And I remember crying when I was able to speak, like you said, hey, my name's Derek and I'm an alcoholic. I chose AA because that was my dad. My dad he introduced me to AA. Funny, ironic fact, I was going to Alcoholics Anonymous before I was even legally allowed to drink, and I was already addicted. So
wow,
yeah, I was already doing this before I was allowed to publicly even drink. So there was already that happening. But I remember, crying out, my name's Derek and I'm an alcoholic. Hey, Derek, I need your help. I need help. I don't know how to live. I don't know what to do. Crying out, looking around, desperate. I'm desperate. My skin's crawling. I should probably be locked up in a rehab or a detox center somewhere right now. But I'm 7 days or 6 days off heroin. And I try to avoid using drug terms because they want it to be traditions, right? About alcohol.
I see.
But I say I'm an alcoholic and other things, and I am. I'm not just saying I'm an alcoholic because I'm trying to fit in there. I legitimately figured that out the hard way, that I am alcoholic as well. Anything that I can escape with. And someone in the room, it was magical. The social setting is magical because that is where people think this divine thing's happening. And I think it's because humans are meant to connect. They might call it divine or spiritual. I might call it practical, pragmatic, and scientific, because when they look at me in their eyes, I could see that they know my suffering, and they look at me and they go, hey, my name's Bob and I'm an alcoholic. I'm like, hey, Bob. And I'm looking at him. He goes, I know how you feel.
Right.
You got this. Keep coming back. Just keep trying. Don't give up on yourself. Get a sponsor. Talk to someone. Dude, that shit was wonders for me. And so what I did is I kept coming back, and eventually it stuck. And it wasn't that I was praying to higher powers when I first got clean. I was praying to a higher power. I didn't know what it was. I said, if whatever you are, if you're out there, just help me, like a foxhole prayer to anything. And eventually you come across those slogans about the 2 feet in the sand. Like I was telling you before we hit record, you're looking back at your journey and you're going, well, there's only 2 footprints. And they're like, yeah, I carried you when those 2 footprints. And I'm like, I'm the one who was walking. And you start to realize it was the loved ones around you. It was the groups. It was the people and yourself that lead you to where you're at. It's not Santa Claus or Odin or Vishnu or, you name the God, Jesus, right? That might be the avatar through which you think your world through, but no, you did it and you have what it takes. There's a kind of a parable that I heard along the way that really hit for me because I was coming out of Christianity, and you probably will relate to this. It's not written in any holy book, and it goes like this. When God went to make mankind, humans, he was speaking and saying, I'm going to make humans intelligent, driven, loving, amazing creatures. They're going to be similar to me. They're going to be making all sorts of stuff. They're going to have love for one another, like all these amazing qualities and attributes. Little did he know, Satan's in the background listening and thinks, ooh, God's going to make man like this. I got to hide God from man. So he says, okay, I'll hide God in the mountains of the earth. Underneath the mountains and the rocks, they'll never find him there. And he's recalling the voice where God says, man is going to be amazing. Man is going to be brilliant, driven, motivated, intelligent. He'll find a machine, remove the rock, and discover God. I can't hide God there. So where can I hide God? Satan thinks long and hard again. I got it. I'll hide him under the oceans, beneath the sand of the sea. He'll never go down there and find God. Man will be brilliant, intelligent, driven, motivate. He'll create an apparatus that'll help him descend to the bottom of the ocean, sweep away the sand, he'll find God. I can't hide God there either. So now Satan thinks long and hard, where can I hide God that man will never find him? Light bulbs go off. I got it. He says, I will hide God inside of every human being, inside of them. They will journey their entire lives seeking and searching, looking outwardly, trying to find God, and never stop for one moment and look inside themselves and realize it was them the whole time. And for me, as I was coming out of addiction and deconverting and expanding my knowledge of myths and things, because I started seeing like patterns in other religions that were also in the Bible and stuff, I didn't look at those as demonic and this one good. I started realizing maybe we're the 6 wise men of Hindustan to learning much inclined who went to see the elephant, but all of us are blind, that each my observation might satisfy the mind. So we go to touch the elephant and one says it's a tree trunk and one says it's the wall. But we have some commonality, but we have differences. Maybe God's bigger than just this one religion. Maybe God is of all world religions and all mankind. And when I heard that it was us, in us, right? Each person, I realized it was like, it's you. Like, love yourself. And what are we doing with these walls of religion and dogmas and stuff? It's insane. It really made me realize like the walls we've set up that divide us, in my mind, needed to go. And that has been the war MythVision has been on since day one. Let me tear down the walls and show you how human all of them are. And if you want to believe something, go for it. But you're playing yours is truer and historically accurate and everyone else's isn't. That's my war. Because you're full of it. That's where I'm at now. Because I think it takes away from the progress of humanity when ours is true, unless everyone bends the knee and becomes like you. I like the diversity, but the dogma needs to go. That's the problem with what I'm finding and MythVision's trying to accomplish.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, and I appreciate that because that was like the main thing that I think messed with me the most. Like I was raised like homeschooled and like heavily indoctrinated in like this ultra fundy kind of like demons are all over the place. They'll get you if you're not doing your Bible study every day and stuff. Which is terrorizing to a child, by the way. That's just a weird thing to tell a kid. But yeah, and it was very much like ours is the right one. Everybody else is mistaken. And I think that was like honestly one of the biggest like kind of snapped me out of shit was like when we were in those groups and religious type stuff, higher power stuff would come up. And it was so interesting because I was like the one in the group to be like, no, but you guys are doing the religion wrong. So check it out. Mine's the right one. And you're reading the Bible verse wrong. Now check it. And I would like, get so hung up on that type of shit. And it seemed to come really clear that like, that the argument from inconsistent revelation, where you're just like, why is this ultra powerful Holy Spirit? Why is he saying different things to different people? And then everybody's pointing at everybody else going, you guys aren't doing it right. And they're pointing back at them going, no, you're the one not doing it right. And they're just like, can we check? Nope, can't check. There's no way to, So yeah, it's just a mess. And it's very unhelpful as far as just, just bringing people together. Because you all, like what you're saying, they'll always fucking say that where they're like, oh man, Jesus brings everybody together, man. Because like there's an old guy who's like 72 and he's friends with a 15-year-old because they both got Jesus in common. And it's like, but it's super divisive because they're like, no, my version of Jesus is the right one and everybody else's is incorrect. And if everybody would just do my religion, then we'd all come together. That's like how they're thinking about it. And it's like, that's not the right way to think about it.
I agree. I've got friends who are pagans, like, and I mean, they don't find the word derogatory when they use it. They call themselves pagans or heathens or whatever. They're totally okay with using it. Some people find offense to it, but some like of my friends are legit polytheist pagans. And they even go, so now these are people, some of them that actually believe in miracles. Okay. Obviously, I'm critical of that and don't buy it, but I say that to say that they even grant the Christian narrative potentially having a resurrection. Now, mind you, now imagine this. Imagine this polytheistic pagan who says, sure, maybe he did rise from the dead. He's not the only one. So did Asclepius, raise people from the dead, Heracles, Isis, and they can list Apollonius of Tyana did miracle after miracle after miracle. And they grant that maybe there's historicity to those miracles in their mind, right? Well, hold on. If Jesus rose, that means that only God rose Jesus from the dead, meaning Christianity is true. Why are the other ones not factored in? Why are they ignored or downplayed? And here's the point. At least they're consistent. And do you see how, at least in the pagan world, they grant Christianity as one, just another one? Meaning, hey, join the party with your Christian ideas. Cool. Oh, you don't play nice. Oh, see, look who's the asshole now who brings the religion and is trying to cut everyone's rugs from underneath them so that they all have to follow my ideology. The pagans don't give a shit. They're like, bring it. The more the merrier, the more gods and fun. Cool. It's like almost fabricated. It's like built into the ideology of I must destroy any and all other deities. Ours is the only one. And when you have that mentality that is out there coercively, socially, and especially with the kind of power they have in the social setting, specifically in America, like, dude, we have some work in front of us, right? So I guess what I'm saying is I have nothing. I don't even sweat it. People go, why did you interview Rabbi Tovia Singer? He's a fundamentalist Orthodox Jew, for example, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah. So when's the last time you've had Orthodox Jews knock on your door or try to go out of their way to convert you or try to push their particular religion down your throat? I don't have that experience. I don't have that experience even with Muslims. Now, I live in America. I imagine if I went to a Muslim country, I'd have that experience. And I do think right now that religion needs serious reforms, okay? There's a lot of toxic stuff in the world right now in Islam, right? But I'm making a general point of saying, like, if you can believe whatever you want, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. You could be a polytheist. You could think miracles are true, whatever. Notice they're not out here also trying to shove Odin and Thor down your throat or tell you that you must accept these particular gods. No, They just kind of want to be allowed to do their thing, believe their ancient traditions and whatnot, and they're not doing this in a weaponizing way to take over the world. There's a reason Islam and Christianity are the two most popular in the world. It is built into their fundamental religion to convert and make everyone like them. You either bend the knee, every knee shall bow, or it's going to be judgment, or at sometimes in history, Christianity would use the sword or whatever in order to make it happen. The same goes for Islam. Islam was born in a time where conquest and empires were killing each other, and that's what they learned from its outset. And there were times of peace where they didn't do those things. And then there were times they revert back to violence, just like Christianity. Even though, this is the shocker, Christians always go, yeah, but our fundamental texts don't teach violence. But Islam allows for that very, very fundamentally into their religion. And I go, that's even worse to me. In a way, that's worse, because if my religion teaches to go by the sword and die via jihad, if you interpret it that way, some say it's internal struggle, but your Christ and Lord and Savior says to die and take up your cross, suffer at the hands of your enemies, don't kill them, be killed by them. In all Christendom, after it's politicized, is out there violently doing this. That's, to me, that's even worse than saying, well, my religion actually teaches fundamentally these kind of ideas that we allow to be there.
Yeah.
In a way. Now, in another way, I think if a religion is fundamentally violent in some ways, it needs to be reformed, but it's a struggle. I'm not going to say one's worse than the other in that sense, but it's really, really odd that all Christians don't listen to the very teacher that in their text. And that's their cop-out. When you get the David Woods and the IPs and the Inspiring Philosophies, for those who don't know, the apologists out there, when you combat these ideas, they have an easy cop-out card. Yeah, but that's not what Christ said. Oh, good job, asshole. Now, anyone who commits violence, you could just say, isn't Christian because they didn't follow this idea. And anyone who does, it's an easy bait and switch kind of move in these kind of engagements. And I find that odd, because I don't think, when my reading of the New Testament, I don't know if I've ever met a true Christian. A true Christian in the biblical New Testament sense will martyr themselves. They will die for Jesus. They will not play the games that even I couldn't go that far. I was trying to be as extreme about Jesus as I could. I could not find myself going that far.
No, definitely not. And back to what you were talking about with the pagan religions, as far as I understand, Bart Ehrman was saying that the reason that Christianity spread so far so fast was because back then it was exactly like what you were talking about. You just add another god, oh cool, so you got a god too. Well then, I got mine, we got yours. Everybody can just have their own stuff. And then Christianity came around in I want to say in Rome and stuff, and it was oh no, it cancels out all of the other gods or whatever. And that was fairly new, if I'm not mistaken. I remember Bart Ehrman talking about that. Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with this. It's a little more complicated in my mind. I mean, I don't recall exactly, and I don't want to strawman Bart, but there were groups already that were in the philosophical circles, Hypsisterians. There were one godders, and this was outside of Judaism within the pagan world, the pagan meaning non-Jewish world. So the Greeks, the Romans, there were already people in philosophical circles that were already monist and were already coming to a structure of a form of monotheism, though that term monotheism, God, we create terms to make definitions, to make sense of things. And sometimes these terms work against the realities on the ground in the ancient world. It was a lot messier and not as dogma, or not as rigid. So some of these people might have had triads, some of them had dyads, but they had an ultimate one. And Judaism had this ultimate one. And they would just demote gods into angels or demons or other categories and have an ultimate God. So it's like a form of henotheism, polytheism, and monotheism. It's how do you categorize this kind of system? And Christianity came in that philosophical way with really interesting literature that had a way of taking the philosophy of suffering, which many of these philosophical schools were already pushing as the highest degree of good. And they were in opposition to Rome. Rome had conquer through sword, and peace will come through war. And the Julio-Claudian dynasty is literally in direct competition with the Christian one, with Jesus being the dynasty, a Davidic dynasty. I mean, dude, I'm literally doing a documentary right now on this. But I guess what I'm saying is Christianity fit in pretty well in that kind of world that already was doing this Hypsisterian, one God stuff. And you can hear the language even in Acts 17 when Paul quotes Epimenides and another pagan author. In him we move, we breathe, we have our being. Now, I know this isn't Paul. This is Acts, but it's reflecting, according to Acts, something Paul would have maybe likely been in the school of thought of. He's Hellenistic. And then he talks about from one man, all the nations of the earth. So he's combining the Jewish lore with Hellenistic Greek thought and philosophy, where Zeus was the chief deity, and we all have our being through Zeus. So how do you conquer the Greek and Roman world? My answer is you speak their language. Even though you do change things, giving it all Jewish decals, we have Adam and Eve. This is why we're in our state we're in. The Dionysian Orphic mysteries, for example, they had their origin for sin in the fact that the Titans took the baby Zagreus, which is Dionysus. So let me give you the origin myth, right? We know Adam and Eve. You and I both know Adam and Eve. And the Christian perspective, the fall of mankind came. She ate it. Serpent tricked her. She ate the fruit. And then boom, mankind's in a shitstorm. We blame women for it, right? You see?
Right.
Well, in the Orphic Dionysian one, this goes back to the 5th century BCE. So Zeus has a child with Persephone, and the name of the child is Zagreus, which is also Dionysus. I think it's Thracian. But the Titans, which are these divine beings, but they're not gods, they're powerful, practically gods, but they end up out of jealousy because they know that the child of Dionysus is going to rule the heavens. He is pretty much the descendant that is going to get the throne. And so in order to nip it, they're trying to usurp the prophecy, if you will, and they eat the baby Dionysus by luring him with toys.
They eat him? They eat
They rip him into pieces, they kill him, and they eat his body. They eat the infant Dionysus. Zeus, in his absolute rage, zaps them. Lightning bolt to the core. They become ashes on the earth. Literally destroys these Titans, and their ashes cover the earth. Humans later are created from the earth, from which Dionysus and the Titans have now merged. So when you make mankind from the clay of the earth, as Adam and Eve were made in Genesis 3, in the Greek Dionysian myth, the humans are made of divine essence, Dionysus. They have the divine spark, which Plato talks about as well. And they also have the human wickedness from the Titans. So where does good and evil come from? The merging of a god and the fallen Titans, which have died and covered the earth. So when you behave a certain way, they would look at you and go, that's the sin nature of the Titanics, the Titans. And when you did good, that was the divine nature of Dionysus Zagreus in you. And they would purge the sin nature through practices in the mysteries. And one of those practices is called homophagia. The Maenads would, I don't know if this is historically, some scholars think this actually was a thing they did, is they'd kill a little, like an animal, say a rabbit or some type of animal. They would rip it in pieces, kind of like you imagine the dove that's torn in half by with Abraham and Yahweh, the sacrificial kind of concept of being torn in half. They would tear the animal the same way that the Titans tore Dionysus as a baby, and then they would chew on the raw flesh. Jeez. It was part of their ritual. Where do you think, honestly, where do you think Jesus gets this idea, chew my flesh and drink my blood? And it's not eat my flesh. The Greek there, this is in Dennis MacDonald's book on the Dionysian Gospel. In John, he says, chew my flesh and drink my blood. Jesus says that. This is not Jewish. This is clearly from the Hellenistic world.
Right.
So I'm saying they're speaking in a Jewish way. Christianity is a Jewish Hellenistic cult that is clearly marketing the non-Jewish world, which is why it was so successful in the non-Jewish world. And there's so much more I could get into about this idea. But they believed that they would have immortality. We even have 5th century golden plates they're called passports, that when you died, they would bury them with the dead, and it would allow you entry into the blissful afterlife, the post-mortem blessed afterlife. And guess who forgives you of your sins? Dionysus.
I thought he was like the party god. That's funny. I thought he was like, isn't he the blue man on the table? But he was freaking out.
Much more, bro. Well, guess who else is a party god? Read John chapter 2. Jesus shows up to a wedding in Cana. They're already drunk, it says. They're already drunk.
Right.
And then they run out of wine. They've drank all the wine. They're partying. Next thing you know, he says to these men after his mother goes, look, they've ran out of wine. He goes, it isn't my time. Now, scholars think that's a hint at his death later. Look, it's not my time yet to fulfill these things. And then she tells the people at the party, hey, do what he tells you, whatever he tells you. This mimics Mark, by the way, in the language verbatim, but I'm getting in the weeds. This is what we do at MythVision, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, hell yeah.
He tells them, take these 6 jars that are empty. This is important. They're empty. Fill them with water. Then take that water to the guest or to the bridegroom, and they do. And they go, oh, whoa, you saved the best for last. Man, everybody's already plastered. And usually you give the shitty wine once everyone's drunk, then they can't tell. You gave us better wine in the end. So now they got 5 jars, and based on the measurements, it's like 110, 120 gallons of wine. Like, he helped them get plastered. Jesus is a party wine god. In John chapter 2, he's a party god in this context. And so he's a gift-giving God. In John chapter 1, it talks about he gives us grace upon grace, and technically grace is a gift. Dennis McDonald points out it's gift upon gift. So he's giving gifts. And if you watch over and over, I will give you water that you'll never thirst again. I will give you food that you'll never hunger again. He performed miracle after miracle after miracle. Anyway, it's a gift-giving God, just like Dionysus, but much, much more than just wine. And that's Dionysus as well.
Huh. That's fascinating. I would not have never drawn that connection before. That's so interesting.
Most people don't know where to find it, and no one's ever tried to bring this to the front. Because if I'd have known what I know now, 15 years ago as a Christian, I would have slowly exited that Christian bubble wherever I would have landed. Not saying I would have become atheist, agnostic. I don't know where I'd be, but I know I could not have remained what I was if I was being honest. That's just the facts, man. I couldn't.
Right. And I wanted to ask you this too, because I was just recently, you got name dropped on one of the Fundy channels that I watch quite a bit, actually. Was Ruslan. And he was like, he was talking about how, and it was funny because I wanted to get your take on this, because like he had Cosmic Skeptic over there, right? And he kind of did this thing. It was Cosmic Skeptic, and he basically was like, if you would just take 6 months and just do the religion, he was like, just do it, and then he's like, I think you'll figure out that it's actually right once you've done the work, like once you've decided to just behave like a Christian for 6 months to a year or whatever, and then you'll just figure out that you're right one time. And I was just like, wow, dude, like tell you to believe it in order to figure out that you do actually believe it is kind of a weird mind game that I feel like a lot of Christians do play, right? Because they're like, just cry out to the Lord, and then confirm your bias that he's responding to you through the signs that he just, you know what I mean? But tell me about like, so he said that y'all had like a private correspondence that you like talk every so often.
Yeah, listen, man, like I imagine most of these people in real life are probably really cool dudes, or at least, you know, they're normal like us. They just have their own bias. They have their own agendas. And you know, it becomes an easy social media thing to make enemies, right? I have his cell phone number. He has my cell phone number. Like, we text occasionally. The goal is at some point to appear in his studio and have a conversation with him. It'll probably get a bit combative because I know how he is. He wants to push the buttons, and I'll do my best to you know, help understand. My goal is not to destroy these people's hope. I don't want to destroy anyone's hope. Unfortunately, the empire that's built is a walled empire.
Right.
And that's where we're going to fundamentally have opposition, period. So whatever one believes, like I can play into it and just be like, dude, I'm going to grant for this discussion that supernatural things happen, because you'll easily go, oh, Bertrand Russell or whoever, you're just against miracles. And therefore you're not, it's all because you're just fundamentally biased against miracles. Pause. For the sake of the discussion, grant miracles. All right. Notice who's really not truly open to miracles as soon as I bring up eyewitnesses, resurrections from the dead, and endless miracles, inscriptions on stone 400-500 years before Jesus by Asclepius, contemporaneous writings about Heracles, Asclepius, Isis, Apollonius of Tyana, the miracles done by Honi the circle drawer. I mean, I can list you so many, and you actually are quickly a rational atheist to these other miracles. Or you might do a Justin Martyr thing, but I haven't heard modern apologists do that, where they say, well, those are demons. Those were demonic. They're distracting people. And then you really have to reverse the question and go, how do you know that Christianity is not the demonic one that's tricking you? And really, those are the true ones. I mean, what if that is what is the case? If we want to grant miracles, how come you're closed off to miracles? I thought we were open to miracles. Oh, we're not open to miracles. We're just open to our miracles. Got it. Yeah, that's not a double standard or special pleading at all, which is my problem. You see what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is such a good play, because that is like what ends up happening a lot. It's like, you get this like, oh, you're just closed-minded to anything supernatural and stuff like that. But that's a great way to flip it. Is because, and I'm gonna have to like go back and write down all those people you just mentioned, because I do want to bring this up when I'm talking to folks in the future. Sure. As to like all of those that they did miracles, they came back to life, and yet you don't believe any of that stuff. So
no, they don't. Remember now, this is a cumulative issue. All of us have cumulative built ideas, right? So for them, they start with the premise that the Gospels and the New Testament are historically accurate of what actually happened. Right. And this is easily falsifiable. This is easily checked. You can actually find out real quick. I mean, I'll give you two examples right now. Was Pontius Pilate really someone who would wash his hands and find a Jew who just flipped over money changer tables in the temple that he, by the way, would have definitely not been okay with? This revolting figure flipping over money changing tables in the temple, all right, which is supposed to be what brings taxes to Rome and all of this. And you think this guy would wash his hands finding this rebel of sorts innocent, when we have nothing but Philo of Alexandria, Josephus, and external evidence to point out how cruel and crude he was to Jews, period. And how do they even know about the story or the discussion between Pontius Pilate and Jesus? Where is the eyewitness that was there to know what was said? So you have problems, first of all, historically with the character of Pontius Pilate. And then you have who told him about this conversation. No one was present to be able to relay what was discussed between Pontius Pilate and Jesus. Jesus goes straight from that to the cross. He doesn't have time to go tell his disciples. Pontius Pilate, what are you going to say, converted at this point? Yeah, you know what? I would not be shocked if Christians went, well, Pontius Pilate, before he died and was no longer alive, he went to the Christians who were, this little group, and told them, actually, here was my conversation. Write this down. That's how far apologetics will go to try and make this stuff true. So there's that. Number two is this, John the Baptist. John the Baptist was beheaded, according to Mark, by Herod under his daughter and his wife. His wife pretty much had his daughter dancing in a sexual fashion in front of his father and guests, which, by the way, was incestual. The way it's making Herod look even worse. So it's propaganda against Herod in this text. And the head of John the Baptist is brought on a platter because he promised his daughter anything she asked, he would give. And he didn't know she was going to ask for John the Baptist's head. And he's reluctant, resistant to this idea of having John the Baptist's head on a platter. When you go to Josephus about John the Baptist, he is a baptizer. He had a large following. And he's so concerned about this following and its problem for him being a king in Israel, that he arrests John the Baptist and removes him all the way to this place near the Dead Sea named Machaerus. He kills him not by beheading him, but he is killed away from the crowds that are all the way over here in Galilee, Jerusalem, Jordan, that region, so that they didn't revolt. This is radically different historical reportage of what happens to John the Baptist versus what Mark does. And it's ironic that you could find the tropes of mythology even in these stories where there are real people, but they're painted in a fictive way. So did Pontius Pilate exist? Yes. Did Pontius Pilate really have this, what is truth, you Jewish peasant from Galilee?
Right.
You think he's really caring what this guy is like? Sure, you can think what you want because you're coming from believing this is eyewitness reportage like they do. But this is very fictive in nature. And how the author writes is writing from an omniscient author stance. There's things he knows he should not know or should be very cautious and say, we think or heard this is what was said. No, the authors of the Gospels literally tell you like they know everything. That's a sign of fiction, an author who writes as an omniscient author. And I can go into endless examples. We can go into other examples where we say, that sounds fictive. And I can give you alternative accounts of literature that they do that. And Christians go, yeah, that's fiction. But then you come to this one and they go, this happened. So the problem is verisimilitude, or what classicists called realisms. When you write a fiction, you put it in a real historical setting. You write it in a way that gives real people, places, and things, but you write a story. It's a story. So you put Dionysus in Euripides. He's in Thebes. Thebes is a real place. So people don't know Thebes is a real place, but the story is a story. And so there's so much more I can get into, bro. But
wow, that's awesome. Because like that was a big part. Because like my excuse would have been back in the day, if we were to brought that up, is that, well, the authors were getting the stuff they couldn't possibly know directly from God, right? Which is, of course, that's the apologetic I was like hardcore fundamentalist.
Yeah.
We were almost presuppositionalist as far as like just starting from the Bible has to be true and our interpretation of it is perfect and everything. And I think like going into a lot of this stuff where because I feel like I was like on the fence, like I was an atheist in the sense of like I really like this community, I'm no longer part of the religion that I was part of, but there was part of this like my mind that was like, I don't know though, maybe it is, there's something to it, because of course that's like left over for a long time. But like stuff like that, when you get into the differences between the different gospels, and just like one of a great one, because somebody was like asking me this the other day, and I would just ask them like how many angels were at the tomb, because they're like, what contradictions? And there's no contradiction. Well, okay, well, how many angels were at the tomb? Is it 1, 2, or 0? And they'll just, well, I think there was 2 because of it's all 3 of those, dude. Like actually all 3 are in the Gospels, and it's, that broke apart a lot, honestly, for me. Like, oh, so this is literally a lot of it just made up. I mean, or just.
Well, yeah, but that's what makes it fantastic. That's what really makes it so fun, is we can see those differences. For me, like, you only go so far when you're in the believing world and this works. And the magic is abracadabra and it's fun. And then you kind of like, sure, you can keep going if it works for you. But like for me, I'm trying to teach atheists and skeptics and agnostics and wherever you're at, non-Christians, I don't care, to actually enjoy the Bible again. I want them to enjoy the Bible as literature, not as a dogma. But your point about, well, I would have just said the Holy Spirit. I've got a documentary coming out. Me and my buddy Stephen Ford, he wrote the script, but I did the narration and looked over the material, of course, to make sure we're good. And we come to that as the final conclusion, right? The final conclusion is once we have all these they call it omniscient narrator motifs. This is established in fiction, period. Like you don't find this in like literal historical biography of like actual accounts of what actually happened. You find this in fictive material to account a story that the author knows things that no one else should know. And I'll give you one more and then I'll address the point that you brought up, which is a good one, but it also works against the whole eyewitness motif. Here's the thing. Judas, he betrays Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. Jesus whispers, go do what Satan enters him, right? which is also reflecting that earlier scene where Jesus goes into the wilderness to be tempted by Satan. So Satan kind of plays this narrative role in the background, and he enters into Judas to fulfill what he was supposed to do. And he goes off and he gets the 30 pieces of silver from the temple, from the priest in the temple, and they end up capturing him. And then he has a change of heart, right? Either maybe Satan left his body and he's like, oh shit, what did I do? Which he had no control over at the time. He goes back to them and has a conversation with the priest, right? Think about how much detective work you have to do to try and find out what this conversation, how do you know about this conversation? How do you know what they actually said, right? So he goes back to them and he's like, no, and he throws the 30 pieces into the floor on the temple. The Jews amongst themselves, this author doesn't say Judas said and then went and told the disciples. They take the money and they pretty much like say, all right, well, dude, look, see ya. It's already too late. Bye. And Judas is leaving. They amongst themselves now have a private conversation. The author knows about a conversation that the priests who are conspiring against Jesus in the story know. And there's ways in which the author says that they know the heart, like that, oh, well, Jesus knew their heart or their minds. What?
Why would
this is how you know you're dealing with fiction, right? Well, they say amongst themselves, listen, we can't keep this blood money for ourselves. So they said, you know what we can do? We can buy a field, the potter's field. And in some cases, Judas dies in that field, bursted belly, or in another one, he hangs himself. And there's two different stories about how he does it. This is another motif. And then you go to Papias. Papias says that he was cursed so bad from what he did. He swelled up to the size of a wagon, and like worms are coming out of his eyes. And he's like this giant ballooned cursed man because of what he did to Jesus. This is in the early 2nd century, but we only have the evidence of it in Eusebius. And he ends up like imploding, and the stench of the field is so bad that when you pass by that field till this day, it reeks. You could still smell that what had happened to Judas. Like, this is how far they're willing to go in making up like folk tales and myths and stories about Jesus and the apostles. Already right out the gate, they're a myth-making machine. And the question is, who knew and who told the author of this text what that private conversation between these priests was on how they were going to spend this money, where they spent the money? Like, dude, the kind of things you have to do in order to come up with this insight as a detective is implausible. And so what ends up happening is you have the final conclusion at the end of the documentary, which I'm giving you a sneak peek of.
I know, I was going to say spoilers, by the way.
Yeah. I don't mind
it.
People are still going to enjoy the video, right? Because it's great information. You can always refer back to it. But here's the final conclusion. The Christian might say, well, how do you know the Holy Spirit didn't give them all insight and teach them and tell them exactly what happened? And here's the question we leave at the end of the day. If the Holy Spirit could have done that and did do that, there would be no reason on having eyewitnesses. In fact, the entire gospel could have just been told by the Holy Spirit. You don't need humans to have somehow told these stories as eyewitnesses to try and back up your claim. The Holy Spirit told me. In fact, Christians who already drink the Kool-Aid would accept that more than they would a human over here said they saw a thing. So why is that even not? It's so odd how the whole thing ends up being portrayed. And you find this omniscient narration in other literature, fictive, not literal history. You find it in the New Testament. This happened, and I must die on the hill that this stuff is true and what actually occurred. What? Crazy. Like, yeah.
Jesus. So I want to ask too, the what's the name of the documentary coming out?
Which one?
I
got a couple coming, bro.
Which one do you want to market?
Are you talking about the one the one that I just was talking about, or
what's the name of it? So we can.
So this one's going to be. What did we got? I don't even know if we have the title for sure yet. I know it's going to deal with omniscient author. So the Gospels are clearly fiction. They know too much. That's how you know you're dealing with fiction. If they were more cautious, if they were like, we heard it said from one of the brethren. Oh, okay. or someone relayed, and I'm not so sure. Like when you read biographies about people who aren't just trying to invent stuff, they're much more cautious about their sources, and and this is, you can look around Plutarch, you can find all the authors and sources around with biographies and other narratives, and you find these motifs. And when you find people who tell you accept and believe, turn off the critical faculty and just indulge yourself into this story, and almost like you're watching a movie and you're just accepting the Lord of the Rings. It's just coming at you. Frodo with the ring. Oh my God, Gollum, my precious. Holy crap, the army's coming. Like, you don't have a moment to go, is this true or is this false? Other writers who are writing things that are trying to depict somewhat history typically use those they're much more cautious about how they're selling it to you through the narration. This is fictive. Very, very obvious type of giving it to you without you being cautious. You're accepting everything that's just coming at you. So that's that one. I got another one that I'm working on that I scripted totally myself. And dude, I'm like biting off a lot. I'm hoping I can chew it all. It's on the baptism of Jesus. And I'm starting a series on the episodes of the life of Jesus. And this already is probably gonna be a 2.5, 3 hour documentary for me. And this is literally a deep dive, deeper than I think anyone has ever gone in any video about the baptism. What is going on? And if you want, I can give you a synopsis, or doesn't matter. It's up to you. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, you can break it down. Yeah, let me. So you're going into when Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, right?
Right.
And the way that people. Well, before we get to that, like, real quick, are you a mythicist or no? Is that?
I'm not anymore, but like,
okay.
To be very honest, I'm bored with the question at this point, because I know that I can't prove there was a guy, and I don't attempt to act like you can know that there was a guy. I lean that there was probably a dude who got mythologized, the same way you might, say another person like Augustus was Apollo incarnate. I mean, Augustus was said to be Apollo in the flesh.
Really?
And then he gets deified. He has a birth myth. He has life miracles and divine omens and portents and all this stuff, and was even said to, after he died, be seen ascending to heaven. Okay. According to the Roman imperial cult. So I'm torn inside because I could never prove. I lean there was a guy. I understand and empathize with mythicism, because I understand how fictitious this material is in terms of the Gospels. I go to Paul and I think, yeah, maybe there was a guy, but I also wrestle with, damn, he's so absent on mentioning things about the guy. And I don't know how to interpret, on the night he was handed over, 1 Corinthians 11, on the night he was handed over, he said, he took this bread and said, this is my body, and the cup, and said, this is my blood, and do this in remembrance of me. And like it's a Eucharist. He's already saying, eat my flesh, drink my blood, technically, in Paul. If that's actually Paul, then did he receive that information about the night he got handed over through revelation? Through an apocalypse inside him, or did other Christians give him this information? I don't know the answer, and I don't pretend to know the answer. I can hold hands with someone who thinks there was a Jesus. I can hold hands with someone who doesn't think there's a Jesus. All I ask is that we don't be so dogmatic about whatever position we think. The tension becomes mythicist, look at historicist, and they almost see, because think about it. Historicists, for the most part, are Christians. Okay.
Right.
So I mean, they think the guy existed. They go more than think he exists. They think this all literally happened, right?
Right.
So there's this like extreme position of all this literally happened stuff, history. And then you have the more scholarly position. Even Richard Carrier, when he opened his book on the historicity, says this much. He says, the debate, if you were imagining a hypothetical table of scholars talking, there is no conversation with the extreme, this all happened, history, fundamentalist Christian approach. That's not even at the table. And he says that's not even a serious position. The serious position is this. There was probably a dude who got mythologized, or there probably wasn't a dude and he was historicized in narrative form. And these are like the two positions that wrestle. And to me, we're never going to know without extra data, extra evidence that comes forward to prove. But one can see the data we do have and draw a conclusion based on how they are interpreting that data. And I empathize with my mythicist friends. I even get accused of mythicism. They do it to poison the well with me so they don't take me seriously. A lot of the Christians go, oh, you fucking listen to this mythicist? And I'm like, I've stopped even correcting him on that. I'm not a mythicist. As if being a mythicist is some like type of derogatory, slanderous word or something. It's not to me. No. I know amongst academia, they don't accept the position mostly. Most scholars think there was a guy, but we're on YouTube, and I'm not going to let that become a curse word, even though I might have been pushing the apologetics and using the word apologetics in a negative way. And a lot of them realize that too. Why do you keep use the word apologetics or apologist as if that's a bad word? And I'm like, because my definition is you start with a conclusion and then you work over time to make all the data match your conclusion. And I do think it's not a good label that I would want to identify myself with personally, but that's just me.
Yeah, well, I mean, exactly, because they're usually like apologizing for something that's not, and acting like they know stuff, and then just arguing. It's more about the arguments for it and stuff like that. But it's interesting the way you said it with the table, because like that kind of because and it's the scholarship is, and correct me if I'm wrong, like overtaken, it seems, by Christian people. Right, that because most of your people that are going to go like be a Bible scholar, they're not doing that because they're like, I'm an atheist and I just want to learn about the Bible. Typically, the people that want to go learn about the Bible are Christian people. That was like David Fitzgerald. That was like his whole thing. He does Nailed was one of them, and Jesus Mything in Action, and he was like talking about that. Like it's just there's so many Christian scholars on that. So. But to say that they're at the table and the fundamentalist stuff that I was taught, that's not even discussed. But mythicism is actually discussed more than the fundamentalist perspective among scholars. So that's
it's muddy. It's muddy. It's muddy. I mean, because what ends up happening is when you start to realize you don't think this is true, you're going to find scholars who are believers, but they're not believers for this is historical and we know it and this proves it because anyone with 2 brain cells can read and know that this happened. They are scholars who have faith, and they use faith the way faith is like understood in Hebrews, where it's like the evidence not seen, but the hope, the belief, like the I want this to be true kind of position. Right. And some of them have had experiences. Dale C. Allison Jr. had an experience in 1970 something. And James McGrath has had experiences. So he holds on to the belief through Christianity. But like, these are kind of the scholars that are legitimately say, and Jesus was wrong. And you're like, whoa. You're a Christian? See, because we come from fundamentalism. They come from a world that allows humans to make mistakes. And Jesus was a human. And there's all sorts of cool ways in seeing how some of these people who are in scholarship do hold to ideas that we would be like, oh, wow, you just said that. I can't believe you just said that. And you say you're a Christian. But then there is this kind of underlying thing. If you're coming from Richard Carrier or like David Fitzgerald or mythicist, right? And they do think, well, even these scholars will have a bias toward this material in a manner that wouldn't probably permit them to go all the way and thinking maybe Jesus is total myth. So I can't read all the minds of these academics. I give benefit of the doubt, and I love learning from all of them because I can learn from practically any scholar. The last thing I don't want to have on my channel, not the last thing I don't, but like the thing I'm not interested in entertaining is apologetics. So you might get a mix, like some of the more radical critical scholars that I love dearly will look at those not apologetic types, but they will listen to them say things about a saying of Jesus they think that Jesus really said or something. They go, why would he say that? And they think maybe they're doing a little apologetics somehow. It's not a all or nothing world in the scholarship. It's very gradient about how we are assessing this. And to me, I don't feel a threat at all by them, even if I don't agree necessarily with conclusions, because they're not trying to force feed you their religion. They're not doing apologetics like that. If you hear them do it, it's, it's not like I'm offended by it. And so, yeah, I don't know where to go with. I mean, there's so much here, dude, but you're right. People tend to go to college as Christians for ministry reasons or some type of I love Jesus. And then they get into this and they already had beliefs when they went in. And some hold on to it. Once they get through the critical stuff, they still hold on to it and find a way to negotiate their faith with the facts that they've learned. And a lot of them leave, but they don't go the antagonistic route that you and I might have, where chips are on our shoulders and we're like,
Right. Yeah, because I mean, like, I remember I was talking to a pastor that was like my old church, and we were talking about stuff, and I was talking about some of the discrepancies because I was reading Bart Ehrman at the time, and so I kept bringing up like the discrepancies within the Gospels, right? And he was like, "Well, everybody already knows that the last chapter of Mark was added," and in my head, I'm like, dude, I guarantee you don't talk about that at church, man. Like, you seriously saying that you've taught from the fucking pulpit and told people, oh yeah, and this is all added by a scribe, like, just so you know. But here's what it says anyway. I don't even know why we're reading it anymore, because it was added. But like, But tell me a little bit about that. Like, what do you think about that? The last chapter of Mark.
I love it. I love it. I'm so glad it's there.
Right.
Because it adds more spice to the what is going on in Christianity, that they had to add this thing. Let's not straw man. Are there possibly higher churches, Presbyterian, more liberal type Christianities, that from the pulpit they go, yep, they added this in? Yeah, I guarantee you there are. But I think the kind of Christianity you and I come from, and the most popular kind in America, would 100% avoid this like a plague for the most part. Okay, because it is a plague. It is a problem. It is a thorn in the side. Now, the long ending of Mark, if we go, let's pull up Mark here. This is a really, like, there's so much I can't even get into here. And
Right.
I would recommend, there's a book by Richard Carrier, helped me prepare specifically on this one when I was actually going in to engage those guys on the long ending, Wes Huff and Stephen Boyce and all of them. But his book, Hitler, Homer, Bible, Christ, has a lot of articles in there, and he's addressing long ending of Mark and the history of when it starts to show up, what manuscript traditions, patristics. All right, 16:8 is where it ends. Trembling, I'm using the NIV right here just for the hell of it. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid, right? That's where it ends. What's interesting is when you go 16:2, the second verse in that chapter, very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb. All right, it's very early on the first day of the week, right?
Right.
Right? Verse 9. Read verse 9 for me.
Oh, I don't have it pulled up.
Oh, you don't. I wanted you to. I'm sorry. This is a good part. You're going to see what I mean.
Oh.
Can you pull up Mark 9 or Mark 16?
Yeah, let me see if I can do that real quick. So
Cool.
Just go to Bible.
You'll see why I want you to be interacting to see what's going on here.
Gotcha. All right, what was it? Mark what?
Mark 16. Read verse 2.
Okay. 16. Let's just do chapter 16. We'll go with that.
Chapter 16.
That's
verse
it, right?
2. Yeah. Well, after verse 2, I'll have you read verse 9. So just do chapter 16. Just write Mark 16 in Google, and then pick whatever translation comes up. You should be
Gotcha.
all right.
There we go. There's a NIV. Perfect. All right.
Verse 2.
Verse 2. All right, let me share it too, so we can put it up there.
Cool.
Present. Yeah, that way everybody can kind of like follow along with us.
Yeah. Let's have fun.
Hell yeah. All right, cool. Everybody, can see it? It looks good. Let me check my.
All right. Yep.
Okay, so where are we at here?
Verse 2.
Verse 2. Okay, so it was very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise. They were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away?"
Real quick.
From the
let's verse 2. What do you notice in verse 2? Right there at the beginning.
Saying what day of the week?
Right.
On the first
very
day of
early
the week.
first day of the week, right? Go to verse 9.
Morning.
The very first verse
Okay.
after the original ending of Mark, verse 8. Look at verse 9. Read it.
Verse 9 says, when Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he
Pause.
appeared first. So very
Scholars
early.
have been like, you have to repeat the day of the week, 8 verses later, 7 verses. You don't need to repeat. You just said that it was the first day of the week. Why are you saying it's the first day of the week again? You don't need to say it's the first day. We already know. We just read it 7 verses earlier, 8 verse. Like, it's clear they added this, and they're like not realizing how to smoothly transition into after the women were afraid and told no one. They then add, oh, it was the first day of the week. We already know that. This author would not have repeated, if this is the same author, he would not have repeated first day of the week again. And there's several other linguistic reasons and evidences in the long ending that seem to know about Luke, potentially even John. The last chapter of John might be hinted here, or chapter 20 or 21, Matthew. So like there's material in that long ending that scholars think give evidence that it knows the other gospels. And the other gospels have post-death appearances, ascensions. I mean, look at verse. I'm going down here to where does it say he ascended? After the Lord has spoken to them. There you go, verse 19. After the Lord Jesus had spoken to them, he was taken up into heaven, and he sat at the right hand of God. So he ascended. He's up. He's taken up. We know that happens in Acts.
Right.
We know he ascends. I mean, like, there's no ascension narratives in Mark, and except a hint at the transfiguration, but there's no narratives for it. And so there's some type of patchwork being done by adding this long ending, and Christians were not satisfied, for the women were afraid and told no one. Weren't satisfied.
So he was gone. That's it. So it's just it ends with it just being an empty tomb and the women not. Then that's it. They didn't tell anybody.
Yeah,
there wasn't this whole
shocking.
section. Wow, that's crazy. Because I've heard people talk about this, but I was curious as to like where it, like what actually was after that. And so it's like literally his ascension from and flying off into the clouds.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that supposed to be the 500 witnesses that saw him fly away into the clouds? Is that supposed to be
the only person I know who does that is William Lane Craig, and he doesn't go to Mark here, which this might reflect some of that. He goes to Matthew. Let's go to Matthew 28 together. So just at the top, Matthew 28.
Okay.
And it's really interesting to watch what happens here.
There we go. Perfect.
Jesus
has risen. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. There's so many interesting things about this. Jesus rose. Then there's guards, right? So that's a whole nother
the week. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole nother like guards at the tomb narrative that they have to try and explain so that they can keep the disciples from having stolen the body. And these guards witness the resurrection to some degree, him coming out, but they're willing to be bribed. I don't know about you, bro, but if you saw some like resurrection, miraculous phenomena, you're not going to be able to bribe me if it's legit miracle. Okay. But there's so many holes in this idea. But if you go all the way down to verse 16,
the Great Commission.
Yeah. Go ahead and start reading that up to, just read up to 18.
Okay. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me."
Yeah. So William Lane Craig thinks that Paul's 500, he wants to put in this place and think, he doesn't try to be dogmatic, but he thinks, well, I think they were on the hilltop in Galilee here, because Luke does something radically different and has them remain in Jerusalem. They don't go back to Galilee. So it contradicts Matthew and Mark. But on this hilltop, Jesus, the resurrected Lord, right? Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. That's hinted at in Mark, where it says, hey, the young man who's dressed in the white garment who comes out of the tomb, telling the women who are there terrified, tell the disciples to meet him in Galilee, where he said he would meet them. But the women told no one, for they were afraid, right? So in this one, he's saying, then the 11 disciples went to Galilee. So it's finishing what Mark did not finish, right? It's trying to narrate what Mark doesn't. So it's adding, because it doesn't like what happened, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshiped him. Now get this. The 11, because Judas is dead, it only mentions 11, no 500, but there's speculation on William Lane Craig's part. He thinks there's 500 along with the 11, possibly. It just doesn't mention them. So he thinks they're somewhere around this mountain with the 11. Text doesn't say that. He's just trying to connect dots to make a univocal New Testament. It's all on the same page. It all agrees. But here's where it's interesting. I mean, sometimes these traditions do build, but sometimes they build to change the earlier versions, like Matthew's changing Mark, or like Luke changes Mark and potentially Matthew, if Luke knows Matthew, or vice versa, depending on if you're Matthean posteriority or priority. It doesn't matter. Anyway, there's all sorts of positions scholars take, okay? But here's the problem that I always like to red flag. Like, everybody, do you see this? When they saw him, who? The resurrected Lord.
Right.
They worshiped him, but some doubted.
What?
Well, this is a problem. James McGrath said in the video that I did recently when we were critiquing William Lane Craig and Sean McDowell. Do you know Sean McDowell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
His dad, Josh McDowell?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Josh McDowell wrote a book. He says, like, evidence. He's like saying, like, let me see. Josh McDowell, doubt. Let me title. Hold on. Josh McDowell, Beyond Doubt or something book. I'm looking at it right now. Beyond Belief to Convictions. No. Beyond Doubt. I can't remember. He wrote or did something somewhere where he was like, this is way beyond doubt. Like, he is a modern apologist who's saying that it's beyond doubt. And James McGrath makes a wonderful point. And James is a Christian. And he goes, anyone who's like, how can you say you have evidence 2,000 years today, and the 11 are on a hill in front of the resurrected Jesus, according to this story, worshiping him, and some doubt? Right there. We're 2,000 years removed. They're at the feet of Jesus on a mountain, and they're doubting while worshiping him, which tells you, some people who want to think this is visionary in some way, that maybe their experience, if you take this historical, maybe they're on a mountain and they are looking at the sun like Fatima or something, and they're like, is this Jesus? I don't take it that way. I think this is part of the story. But if you take it that way, like, you're 2,000 years removed and you're supposed to not like doubt this material. Like, this is historically, and there are 11 people at the feet of Jesus who walked with him on earth, and they're doubting it.
And they're still doubting.
We should be doubting the hell out of this, is my point. If they're doubting, you really should be doubting.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody would have been closer to the events than them. I mean, it almost kind of reminds me of, and this is why I thought, like, making the movie The Ten Commandments, it's like, they should not put this stuff in movie form, because then you can see how silly it is. Like, when he goes up to the mountain or whatever, and is talking to God and doing his whole thing after God had done all this stuff right in front of everybody, and then he comes back and they've like made a calf and are like worshiping, like, I don't know, you were gone for like 5 minutes, so we had to start worshiping stuff because we can't, like, what are you talking? Did you not just see a fucking what? Like, it's so crazy. Like, I always thought that was like the silliest part of that story, and that's almost, I don't know, kind of feels like this as well. They're just saying they doubted him, even though they just watched it all happen. What?
That's a really good point. Like, I maybe I've thought about that in passing, but never really like capitalized on it. How you just walk through this supposed wall of water and watch this happen. You just, are starving and manna's coming from heaven, or, which, by the way, that's after the golden calf. But either way, like, they're seeing miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle like occur by God's hands. They're led by by day like a wind twister or whatever, and then at night they're being led by fire in the sky. I mean, like there's just so many little reasons to go, yeah, this is real, this is true. And then you get over here and you're like, no, I can't believe, like, it's a fiction. This is how, again, it doesn't historically add up. I think anyone with common sense today who saw those kinds of things, miracles and stuff, would accept, and there wouldn't be any reason to think it's not really happening if you really were seeing what they're describing. It's a story. Right. And they wouldn't do this to the Odyssey or the Iliad. They would just go fiction. They just do it with their own sacred lore. And that's the problem, I think. Nothing against if they want to believe it, but they're weaponizing it as if theirs is true. Look, dude, stay in your church, stay in your house, enjoy your beliefs. Got it. You're out here publicly pretending this is the fact, true, one and only, and it's historically the case. It's not just that they believe it's the case. They want everyone to know, if you aren't drawing this conclusion, you're either wicked, evil, and want to sin, or you're an idiot because it's so obvious. That's pretty much what they're trying to do.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I do want to read this real quick, and I do want to take a couple comments. I don't know how much time you've got left. I don't want to keep it too long.
Back up on the screen, or
was it? Oh yeah, here.
Might as well.
Right there you go. But yeah, it's so Archangel Reese, and I will be taking comments now. I know I try to put it at the end so that we're not I have ADHD, so I get distracted on the back and forth. He said, "Hey Derek, arrange a one-on-one live debate with Wes Huff and Dr. Bart Ehrman, please." What do you think about that?
Dr. Bartman.
Dr. Bartman.
Yeah. Dr. Bartman.
That's funny. Yeah. Also like 6'6", so it's that just came into one.
Yeah, no, you're good. So first things first, I've tried to even communicate with Wes, and he has not a single time since the beginning of his rise to fame through all of the Joe Rogan stuff, the Billy Carson stuff, not once has he personally responded to me at all. I tried to friend him on Facebook. I've written him messages, tried to contact him. I've had a middleman by communicating to someone else who communicated to him, and he responded through to somebody else back to me. And it was, I don't have enough time. Initially, it was just, I don't have time. All my years booked up, period. But a lot of these podcasts that did come up, and I don't blame him for wanting to get popularity, but it's like, clearly he's not interested in communicating or even giving me his time. This is before I started doing video critiques of him, by the way. Then we started doing the video critiques. It's like, dude, all right, clearly you're not interested. And I do think, I didn't even realize how much apologetics he did. So once you watch the Billy Carson debate, YouTube's funny. If I watch a full video of yours, it starts recommending your entire video catalog throughout the feed over time. I didn't realize how many videos this guy for years has been doing, and he remained insignificant until Billy Carson. So now it's significant because of the virality of the social setting of all that. And that being said, he's not willing to debate Neil. Bart Ehrman, I'm going to just tell you straight up, he's a businessman. He won't do this for free, and I'm not paying for it. And there's a lot of loops that you'd have to go through probably to get that to happen. And I don't think Bart gives a crap about doing it. That's my honest opinion. So I'm not going to waste my time, because I've tried to get him to debate Bart to debate other people too. And he's like, I don't have time, and I'm not interested in doing that with these people. Now, it would be cool to have him and Wes go back and forth on textual criticism and just look at these contradictions like flat out and see how Wes reacts, what kind of apologetic he'll pull pertaining to certain pericope in the Gospels. That would be a cool one, since Bart's a textual critic who knows this material. But other than that, I don't know. I don't really see too much utility in that kind of debate unless it is on the actual textual and source material. So what is the manuscript tradition? What do the different schools of these manuscript traditions say? Arguing, can we even really know the original text to this material? And also, what do you do with these contradictions? That would be cool. I don't want Wes to get away from the contradictions, though. I want him to see those contradictions and how the public eye can watch him and Bart go at it over those. That would be cool.
No, yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, they're holding him up almost as some kind of messiah, it seems lately,
Oh, for sure.
because of. I mean, it was a cool. It was, you know what it reminded me of? It was almost like the Drake and um, like Drake and Kendrick Lamar thing. Like that was just an awesome moment for internet history, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Like just a something, and it like, of course, like rocketed Kendrick Lamar, who's absurdly talented. I'm not saying that he like this, that's just what did it, but it helped, you know what I mean? Be rocking him to the top there. And he just did so well as far as like coming back at him and everything. And it kind of reminds me of that, because the way that debate went down with Billy Carson was wacky. And the response that Billy Carson did was wacky, being like, no, please take it down. Yeah.
It wasn't the debate originally. It was the debate followed up with the way that the people that were really working with Wes publicized that he came with legal documents to have it taken down. Then the response video. So if all Billy did was let that original debate fly out, even though he didn't want it to, and he didn't make legal anything, Wes would still remain maybe a lot less significant in my view, but maybe would have blown up if Joe Rogan would have saw it and went, whoa. I don't think it would have gotten the virality if there wasn't legal involvement of remove this video, lawyers involved, and the drama that came with this post debate kind of stuff, and then Billy being angry. At the end of the day, too, my first response to that video, I did not catch all the apologetics that Wes was really doing in it. And while he was correct about some things, I feel like he is so lacking nuance of what's really going on and how much material there is that could have been mentioned in passing along that kind of vein. But he's doing apologetics and he's selling a narrative that isn't going to include that controversial nuance that should be mentioned in these things. And then he also is making apologetic statements that are just factually wrong, that are just wrong. And that's why I started to make these critiques. I've got more videos coming out with Joshua Bowen when he came down here, where Wes was making comments about Genesis. It's just not what the actual scholarship says. The critical scholars, of course. You can go to Apologetics and find it, but they're everywhere. Those people. But as far as like actual scholars go, it's exactly.
And it's funny because like had Justin on like a week ago or so, and we were talking about that, and I was thinking when I was talking to him that the reason that he rocketed to the top, that Wes Huff rocketed, was because of that moment where he grabs the Sinaiticus, what is it? Trying to remember the way that he described it, but he like grabs it off the shelf and he's like, I actually got that right here. And in my mind, I was like, Justin does that shit all the time. He's like, look right there. It's actually what it says, and they have to like, have that scripture like looking right at them, and then they got to try to figure out how to respond to it. So I was like, that to me made it seem like that, but there was all this other stuff on top of it that I wasn't thinking about. I
think you're right. If Justin, I'll give you an example. If Justin pulls off the shelf and he's debating a 1 million subscriber YouTuber who has a massive platform, and then turns around, pulls it off the shelf, debunks him on air at the time, that'll get Justin some noise. But then add that the 1 million subscriber YouTuber is sending legal, do not have this put out there. I am embarrassed by this content. It wasn't at my best. And even if it was just, he was sick. And if you look back, Billy has you could see he came out of a hospital, because he literally has like an injection site where they have the whatever you would call it, the bandage covering the vein. And I feel bad for Billy at this point, because I know that these debates can be embarrassing, but at the same time, I know that Billy also was doing I know better than other people. So at the end of the day, though, Christians behaving that way, of like someone asks them not to put it up, like, hey man, I wasn't at my best, and please don't put this up there, and they still decided to do it. I start going, really? Would a Christian try to destroy you? I guess so. That's exactly what Jesus would do, huh? Try to just destroy everyone and go out of their way to make them embarrassed and but clearly in their minds, they're fighting an ideological war because Billy is an enemy. And so to them, they need to destroy the big dragon that is the village dragon. They got to attack this village dragon who's, in there. But then when me and other critical scholars do videos, like the only person I get that ever responds in the popular sphere of apologetics is Inspiring Philosophy. He's the only guy who will ever do a critique video of me. Everyone else dodges me. Mike Winger, even when I jabbed at David Wood, I think it's because David Wood just knows Islam. That's the only thing he cares about debunking. There's no other apologetics. Maybe Ruslan will mention, but he doesn't really want to go into the weeds with my content, I think. And only Inspiring Philosophy does that, which is kind of shocking to me because I would think I'm a bigger dragon in the sense of actually trying to show why Christianity is not true in the literal sense. And Billy's more of a threat. I think it's more, he's popular. He gets a lot of attention. He's been on Joe Rogan. He's been on Danny Jones. He's been on these massive platforms.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's the subscriber count kind of thing, it really, which does, as far as like the big timer YouTubers and everything go, that really does get you out there. Like real quick, speaking about that, like I think you were on a panel talking with like that Jim Bob dude.
Yep.
You remember that? Yeah,
Yep.
I had actually covered a video of that whole conversation there. And one of the people on that, like, I mean, and there was like really big time. They're on Tim Pool now. I can't think of his name. He's this douchebag, but that debated Matt Dillahunty at one point. And
Andrew. Andrew. I saw him yesterday. He debated on a modern day debate, and Neil, Gnostic Informant, is there, right, doing the debate. He's video calling me, and he's like, "Hey, somebody wants to say hi to you." And there's Andrew, and I said, "Put the phone up to your ear." And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Listen, this isn't an excuse at all, but you remember when we were talking on that Jim Bob conversation? We had a long talk. 2 hours in, I'm writing you guys, going, I'm starving, I'm ready to go, and you were supposed to like." Hey, thanks for joining us today, MythVision. Instead, Jim Bob wanted to talk about I do believe in miracles because prove logic without using logic, dumb shit like that, which was already getting me frustrated because I'm like, these are word games, and clearly they're just doing mental masturbation with these words that aren't doing anything, and it was frustrating, and I'm starving. Well, we went 2 more hours, so I'm already dying, starving. Then Jay shows up, and Jay starts popping out with this weird pre-sub shit again. And I'm going, this is all bullshit, dude. I'm so done with this conversation at this point. You're just making shit up at this point. You're talking. And that's where I lose my cool a little bit, just kind of going like, dude, I'm frustrated. I'm hungry. Who the hell is this third guy? And we're having a 2-on-2 conversation.
Right.
And the questions that were asked also led up to me just getting like, this is getting old. Like, would you do some nasty things to a person in order to save your family? Like these kind of questions of morality that I'm like, you're asking very sick shit to see if I would do it for my family. It just, the whole conversation was odd to me. And I was trying to be as authentic and raw and honest and have a real conversation. I'm trying to be as decent, thinking this is a good one. But I told him that. He goes, I remember that. And I'm like, well, I bet if we ran it back, without me having to be hungry or whatever, we could talk about these things. The problem is I'm not trained on precept scripts. I'm not interested in this bullshit. And I think it is bullshit kind of conversation.
100%. Yeah, 100%. It's flim-flam logic. It really is. Yeah. It's just, you know the words. I always compare it to like, if I were to debate somebody that's a mechanic, but the mechanic knows all the words, but they're trying to convince me that the car runs on leprechauns on hamster wheels or something, but they know all the words. So, and I don't even know what a carburetor does. So it comes out sounding like that. They know all the words. But yeah, that was crazy. I couldn't believe that. I didn't realize it went on that long. I was watching it through Jay's clips that he clipped out.
I was so frustrated by the end. I'm like, guys, let's go. I'm tired. Why is this guy? Who is this guy? And why is he popping in the last minute? It made no sense, but it turned out the reason they did this is they wanted a gotcha, right? Need that. This is also unfortunate about the kind of environment, the kind of audience that they acquire. They're very toxic. to this day, for example, I'll do a video showing you why the birth of Jesus is mythology or legend based on the fact of other birth myths, and in the narratives, they contradict each other. They don't even agree with each other. So one of them, if you take this as historical, you think it really happened, one of them happened, one of them didn't happen, or both of them didn't happen. And you can't have both of them happened. So there's so many problems, right? I'll do a video on the birth myth, and what do? A random comment, Jay Dyer cooked you in the kitchen. And I'm like, if that's how you cope with if that is your way to, I feel better now that you debunked my myth, but Jay cooked you. Like, if that makes you feel psychologically better, go for it. It tells me something about the community and the kind of people when they hunger off of that. In fact, I was watching the modern day debate with Neil from Gnostic Informant, who, by the way, took these debate topics last minute. He jumped into this debate with Andrew Wilson and this other one he did with AP, Apostate Prophet, on Islam, to say, is Christianity better than Islam? AP says Christianity is better than Islam. And of course, Neil's trying to take the stance that no, they're the same. And I think that people have the impression that Neil's trying to say that it's better or something. No. Neil immediately capitulates the idea and goes, actually, right now, Islam, in the grand scheme of things, in his view, is worse. Okay. But medieval Christianity was jihadi Christianity. Like, they were killing people by the sword, and they were literally by the sword trying to conquer and kill. Now, of course, they were going back and forth. Here's the point. I was watching the live stream chat, and all AP had to do, no actual real argument during these sections where they're like, there's no real evidence that he's presenting. He just is being like snarky, laughing, a little bit of performance, putting on it's like me arguing with you, and we're having factual back and forth conversation. And then all of a sudden I'm going, Brentley, are you seriously smoking? Like, come on, man, you've got to be on something right now. Come on, everybody. Right. Right? My audience is in the chat going, Derek just cooked Brentley. Like, that is literally what they were doing. And I'm sitting there going, there's not a single fucking argument that you just made. But everyone in the chat that's on like AP's Christian side was like, he cooked Gnostic. What an idiot. Gnostic's a dummy. I'm thinking to myself, why should I take any of these people serious and their audience? Which is why I've been making the videos lately, like Beyond Apologetics, before I had my surgery, or hinting in the live stream saying, I feel dirty when I engage with apologetics these days, because it's really not about the facts. It's about, how do I keep my beliefs? How do I psychologically keep my shit intact? And I could do so much more with real scholarship than I do with dealing with a fan base of, you got cooked, bro. Like,
right.
I don't care about that toxic kind of dick measuring contest with these people. That's not what I'm here for.
That's why I always say, like, debate only, like, it's fun, and I think that you can learn a lot through it and everything, but like, it's still just fucking theater, man. Like,
100%.
Right. Because I've watched a flat earther take a scientist and make the scientist look like the idiot. And that because of that performative kind of like stuff and saying a bunch of stuff. And if you're a person in the audience that doesn't know all the facts about planet Earth and the way that it works and everything, it sounds like the flat earther might know what he's talking about. And the scientist is like, look, I actually know what I'm talking about. And but what about this? What about that? What about? And he just didn't get to it fast enough. And they're like, oh man, the flat earther just cooked them. And you're just like, 100%. If that's something that can happen, debate is not where it's at as far as, just proving things goes. Like you said, it's theater. It's not like, I honestly think you're doing a much better job dealing with the scholarship and stuff like that.
Well, I think you're right. And look, I confess, I've never done public professional debates. I've never, not saying I couldn't, I would want to train and be prepared rhetorically.
Right.
But my problem is, and this is going to sound kind of fucked up about the state of debates, is if I did debate someone, I want to debate someone I respect and someone that I think is legitimately going to take serious the arguments that are being put forward. And I have no interest in engaging a joke. Even the conversation I had with Jim Bob and Andrew, I went into it thinking we're going to have a real, you're Christians, we're not Christians conversation. Let's be friendly. And it was for a while. I mean, there were moments where I was like, okay, this is cool. We're having somewhat of a decent, but then there were moments where I'm like, what the hell's going on right now on the stream? And I'm interested in authentic conversations. And if you're wanting a shit show, a Jerry Springer match, you want a gladiator ring, that is fun. That is what they're doing, is it's performative. But I feel like there's a time for that. There's a place for that. And I may not be the best one for that, because I do take these ideas seriously and really want to talk about the facts. And it's hard to do that when your opponent is making it more of a rhetorical thing instead of an actual dialogue of the actual data and what's the evidence really suggest. And this is something that I notice, like the way that they debate. I've seen it. Inspiring Philosophies debates. It's gotchas. It's not so much about, can we both come to learning more from this engagement, which is why I prefer dialogue, even with people I disagree with. I mean, look, I've had conversations with Inspiring Philosophy. You've probably seen some of the videos where me and him have engaged in dialogue. Those are what I like. I don't care for the if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like you said, the Jerry Springerness of it all.
Exactly.
Right. Well, hey, thank you so much, man, for coming on. I really do appreciate your time here. I had a blast. This is really great.
Thank you. Yeah, I we should have done it sooner.
Yeah, that's all right. I never know when I'm like sending stuff. A lot of times I'm just like, because there's like a subscriber count threshold where I'm like, yeah, right, this is never gonna happen there. But I'm gonna just I took a shot and I was like, wow, okay, cool.
Well, yeah, I always tell people, just because they're worried about, well, Derek's so busy, and I am, but I can try to find a window. Or he's got these subscribers. Like, dude, I'm a real dude. I'm just like everybody else. And I want to have more people think through these things and have fun. Yeah. And I want to help grow the community. So I hope anyone watching from MythVision will subscribe to you as well, and be supportive when you go live, because you do go live often, and they can come and say, hey man, I found you from your conversation the other day with MythVision. And this gets back to the recovery, because that's the most important thing, is how are you living your life? How are you enjoying your life? Right. Because all this stuff's all, did Jesus say that? Did this gospel, that's all cool. Truth is, when there's a comment in the morning, you wake up and you see a comment from someone saying, Brentley, you know what, man, you helped me. You helped free me, or you gave me hope the other day, and keep it up, man. You're a great host. And I enjoy your show, and I love watching what you do. And that, I don't need to speak for you, but how does that feel when you hear that?
Yeah, no, that means a lot. That's my goal, is to help people heal after religious trauma. And a lot of times we do that through laughter, and sometimes that people are like, oh, he's being kind of mean, but like the whole idea is to just laugh at the stuff that used to terrorize you. And you know what I mean? And it really does help. Like, in a lot of ways. So like, yeah, but no, and a lot of people have reached out and told me like that really does help to be able to point and laugh at the stuff that used to terrorize me. So, and that's exactly the kind of comment I would get there.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Laugh at the stuff that used to terrorize you. Because for me, like, I now laugh, but actually can find enjoyment in realizing their stories. Right. So you can laugh and go, why did I take this so seriously or literally? In fact, it was Justin Sledge from Esoterica, when I interviewed him recently, where I told him about this, and he said, well, if I'm going to take my religion seriously, I'm not going to take it literally. If I take my religion literally, I'm not taking it seriously. So wherever you land in life and wherever you're at on your journey, don't take it literally, but take it seriously, even if seriously laughing at how ridiculous the stuff we once were tortured or, found to be literally true and all that. Like, have fun with it,
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of time when it comes to that type of stuff, it's more like satanic panic stuff that I really, I can be kind of mean, just because like the convincing people that demons are like they're getting demons out to like get people's mental health back, whatever. Like, that's very problematic, for a lot of reasons. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, no, I think like anytime, like you were saying, like anytime you engage on a topic, you really should take it seriously. And because if you don't, then people are going to watch the video and go, man, you didn't even look into what they were actually saying, and you just straw man the whole thing. And that does more damage than I think it does good, you know?
Right.
So you absolutely got to look into the stuff. For sure.
Exactly. But, yeah, bro. Well, thank you for inviting me on, and I'll get back to getting my editing going. And anytime, man, message me. You got me on Messenger, and I hope that many people come over from MythVision.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate it. Now I will definitely be in touch, man. Keep it up. You are
Thanks,
really a leader in the community. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
All right, man. All right, y'all. Well, hey, thank y'all so much for hanging out. If you do want to support the show, you can support us by supporting our sponsor, adamandeve.com, or which is, again, enter code word Brentley at checkout to get 50% off almost any one item, 6 free movies, 3 free gifts, and free shipping on the whole order. Just enter that at adamandeve.com, enter code word Brentley at checkout. But if you want to do some other stuff, we got a bunch of ways that you can help support us. You can become a patron. You can do a one-time thing on Cash App. You can become a member by hitting that join button. Email me at punkapostate@gmail.com. Follow me on the Discord, and follow me on all the socials. All the links will be below. But all right, y'all. But seriously, thank you all for hanging out. And the main thing is to stay logical, loving, skeptical, and compassionate. And we will see you next time.